Okay, so you want to own a five-star hotel. The picture in your head is simple. A marble lobby, a doorman who remembers your name, wealthy guests arriving in black cars, checking in at $900 a night, checking out 3 nights later, and you collecting the difference between what they paid and what it cost you to fold the towels. Do that with 300 rooms every night. And the money should be extraordinary. It sounds simple. It isn't. Here's the first uncomfortable number. To build a true five-star property today, developers are spending well over $1 million per room, and in major cities that figure can climb past $2 million. Not for the whole hotel, per room. A modest 300-room luxury property can carry a construction bill north of $300 million before a single guest checks in. That number is where the fantasy starts to crack, because now there's a second question hiding behind the first one. It isn't how much money can this hotel make. It's how much money does this hotel have to make just to survive its own construction bill. Think about what you're actually purchasing when you buy into luxury hospitality. You are not buying a building with beds in it. You are buying a machine that has to convert nightly room rates into enough cash to service a mountain of debt, and it only gets one shot at that conversion every single night. An unsold room tonight is gone forever. There's no warehouse for unsold nights. A five-star hotel behaves less like a store and more like an airline seat that resets to zero value at midnight, except the airline only needs one plane's worth of passengers, and the hotel needs one hotel's worth every night for decades to make the math work at all. So what does it actually take to get into this business? Land in a desirable location, which in a major city can rival the cost of construction itself. Permits and zoning approval, which can take years before a shovel touches dirt. A brand affiliation, because an unbranded luxury hotel struggles to command five-star pricing without a name guests already trust, and that brand relationship alone can cost a developer between roughly $1.5 and $2.5 million in upfront fees for a single luxury property. Then furniture, fixtures, imported marble, custom millwork, and pre-opening staffing and training, all spent months before the first guest arrives. And once construction financing is in place, interest starts accruing immediately, whether or not the building is finished. The Waldorf Astoria in New York shows exactly how this can spiral. In 2014, China's Anbang Insurance Group bought the hotel from Hilton for $1.95 billion, or roughly $1.4 million per room, the most expensive single hotel purchase in American history at the time. The plan seemed reasonable enough. Renovate an aging icon, keep Hilton running it under a 100-year management deal, hold a trophy asset. The renovation was expected to take about 2 years and cost around $1 billion. Instead, it took 8 years, and the bill more than doubled, pushing the combined purchase and renovation cost toward $4 billion. Along the way, Anbang's chairman was arrested on fraud charges, and the Chinese government seized the entire company in 2018, mid-renovation, leaving a state-run successor to finish a project it didn't start. The hotel that reopened in 2025 has 375 rooms instead of its original 1,400, because hundreds of those rooms were converted into private condominiums just to help recoup some of the cost. Even now, industry analysts doubt a sale will recover what was actually spent. That is what happens when the entry cost balloons before you've collected a single dollar of revenue. But let's say the hotel opens on budget. Now look at the first, most obvious revenue engine, the room itself. A 300-room hotel averaging $700 a night at 65% occupancy brings in roughly $50 million a year in room revenue alone. That number looks enormous. And it is enormous until you remember that occupancy is not guaranteed, average rate is not guaranteed, and neither number holds steady through a recession, a pandemic, or a slow news cycle in your city's convention calendar. Room revenue is the business everyone sees. It is also the most fragile part of the business. which is why the second revenue engine matters more than most guests ever realize. Food and beverage, banquets, weddings, corporate events, spa services, and retail concessions inside the hotel often carry far better margins than the rooms do, because a wedding reception books an entire ballroom's worth of revenue in a single afternoon without the nightly turnover risk of a guest room. Resort fees, parking, and minibar markups add another layer that rarely appears in the glossy brochure math but shows up clearly on the balance sheet. In many luxury properties, food and beverage alone can rival room revenue in scale, and it doesn't carry the same one-night-only ceiling that a hotel room does. But that still isn't where the truly interesting money sits. The most profitable part of modern luxury hospitality often isn't the hotel at all. It's the brand sitting on top of it. Here's what almost no guest thinks about while sipping coffee in the lobby. The company whose name is on the building frequently doesn't own the building. Marriott operates more than 9,000 hotels worldwide and owns less than 1% of them outright. Roughly 70 to 75% of Marriott's revenue comes not from running hotels but from franchise and management fees. Typically somewhere around 5 to 7% of room revenue plus a share of profit, paid by independent owners who take on the real estate risk while the brand takes a cut of the top line, largely without the exposure that comes with owning the building. Strip away the pass-through costs, and that fee-based part of the business runs at operating margins that can reach 60 to 70%, a number almost no other part of hospitality comes close to touching. The hotel is a capital-intensive, debt-heavy, occupancy-dependent grind. The brand license sitting on top of it is closer to a royalty stream. That single distinction quietly explains why some people get rich in this industry and others go bankrupt in it. The people who lose money usually own the building. The people who make consistent money usually own the name. Now look at how the physical hotel itself is engineered to extract more from every guest who walks through it. Lobby layouts are designed so you pass the bar before you reach the elevator. Minibars are priced against convenience, not against a corner store. Spa and restaurant reservations are upsold at check-in, when a guest is relaxed and least price-sensitive. Loyalty programs quietly nudge guests toward direct bookings instead of third-party travel sites, because a booking made through the hotel's own app can save the property a commission of 15 to 25% that would otherwise go to an online travel agency. None of this is accidental. Every one of those design choices exists because it moves a guest from spending money on the room to spending money on everything surrounding the room, where the margins are considerably kinder. Then comes the other half of the ledger, the half that doesn't care whether the rooms are full. Payroll for a five-star property is enormous because luxury service requires a staff-to-guest ratio far higher than a mid-scale hotel, sometimes close to one staff member per room once housekeeping, concierge, security, valet, food service, and management are all counted. Utilities for a building with pools, spas, and climate-controlled public spaces run high year-round. Property taxes, insurance, and ongoing maintenance to preserve five-star standards continue whether occupancy is at 90% or 30%, and debts are served. On a building that may have cost $300 million or more to construct, does not pause because a hurricane, a recession, or a public health crisis emptied the rooms for a season. That's the trap sitting at the center of this entire business. Revenue is variable. Costs are not. When demand disappears, the payroll doesn't disappear with it. The mortgage doesn't disappear with it. The building still needs power, security, and upkeep whether or not a single guest is sleeping in it. One bad season doesn't stay one bad season, because a hotel financed with heavy debt has almost no room to absorb a prolonged drop in occupancy before the debt payments start eating into reserves that were never built to last that long. Revel Casino Hotel in Atlantic City shows what happens when that trap closes completely. It opened in 2012 after roughly $2.4 billion in construction costs, built explicitly to attract a high-end clientele of Wall Street money rather than the bus tour crowds that had traditionally sustained the city's casinos. That clientele never arrived in the numbers projected. The property couldn't generate enough revenue to cover debt payments it had taken on to fund its own construction, and it filed for bankruptcy twice before closing permanently in 2014, just over 2 years after opening. It was eventually sold out of bankruptcy court for $82 million, about 4 cents on every dollar it had cost to build. The lesson wasn't that luxury hospitality can't work. It was that a debt structure built around an assumption of high occupancy at high rates has almost no tolerance for being wrong about either number. The Waldorf and Revel failed for different specific reasons, but the underlying mechanism was the same one. Enormous fixed costs layered on top of revenue that depends entirely on guests choosing to show up night after night in numbers nobody can fully guarantee in advance. So how does anyone actually win at this? Mostly by refusing to own the building in the first place. The strongest operators in hospitality today have shifted toward exactly the model Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt now run on, collecting fees for the brand, the loyalty network, and the reservation system, while independent owners and real estate investment trusts absorb the construction debt and the occupancy risk. Scale matters enormously here too. A single hotel with 300 rooms lives or dies on local demand. A brand with 9,000 hotels spreads that same risk across hundreds of cities and dozens of countries. So a soft quarter in one region gets offset by strength somewhere else, something no individual hotel owner can replicate on their own. The future of the business is tilting even further in that direction. Online travel platforms continue to pressure independent hotels on distribution costs, pushing more owners toward brand affiliation just to stay visible. Labor costs in hospitality keep climbing, which rewards operators who can spread technology and automation investments, like keyless entry and AI-driven guest service, across thousands of properties instead of one. And as interest rates move, the cost of financing new luxury construction will keep determining who can even attempt to enter this business in the first place, regardless of how good their concept is. So does owning a 5-star hotel actually make financial sense? At the scale of a single independent property, financed heavily with debt, betting everything on one location's occupancy and rate, the odds are genuinely difficult. And the Waldorf and Revel both prove that even sophisticated, well-funded buyers can get this badly wrong. At the scale of a diversified owner holding several properties across different markets, the math becomes survivable because one weak asset gets carried by stronger ones. And at the scale of the company that owns none of the real estate at all, collecting a percentage of revenue from thousands of properties it never had to finance or build, the business stops looking like hospitality altogether and starts looking like a toll collected on other people's risk. So if you do decide to buy into a 5-star hotel, understand what you're actually purchasing. You are not buying a building full of beds. You are buying a bet on how many strangers will choose to sleep there tonight, repeated every night, for as long as the debt on the building remains outstanding. The safest people in this entire industry were never the ones who owned the rooms. They were the ones who only ever owned the name above the door.